My name is Oliver. For most of my life, my great-uncle Arthur was just a name on a faded Christmas card. A recluse, my mother called him. A odd duck who preferred the solitude of the Yorkshire Dales to the company of people. So, when the solicitor's letter arrived stating I was the sole beneficiary of his estate, Hawksridge Farm, I nearly filed it away as a mistake. But I was 24, drowning in London rent and a dead-end IT job. The promise of a property, any property, was a lifeline. My best mate, Liam, practically shoved me into his beat-up Volkswagen Golf. A free house, Ollie! Even if it's a crumbling pile of rocks, we can sell it. Pub money! The drive north was a transition from grey concrete to sweeping, green emptiness. The village of Hawksmere wasn't so much a village as a clutch of stone cottages huddled against the wind. The pub, the Stone Sleeper's Rest, had a sign depicting a grotesque figure sleeping under a hill. The locals inside fell silent when we entered. Their stares weren't unfriendly, just heavy, ancient. An old farmer with hands like gnarled oak finally spoke. "You'd be Arthur's boy, then?" I nodded. He shook his head, a grim set to his jaw. "The farm's up the old track. Best leave it be, son. Some stones are better left unturned." Liam laughed it off as superstition, but a cold knot tightened in my stomach. We followed the winding track until Hawksridge Farm appeared in a valley below. It wasn't a farm. It was a fortress of dark Yorkshire stone, squat and grim against the brooding hills, its windows like sightless eyes. The key turned with a groan that echoed through the silence. The air inside was frigid and smelled of damp earth and old bones. Dust sheets covered furniture like ghostly sentinels. And it was quiet. Not a peaceful quiet, but a deep, absorbing silence that felt watchful. In the main hearth of the sitting room, unlike any other fireplace in the house, was a large, flat hearthstone. And carved into its center was a precise, deep spiral. It looked ancient. I ran my fingers over the grooves, icy cold. That night, as wind howled around the stone walls, I couldn't sleep. The silence was too loud. And then I heard it. Not a sound you hear with your ears, but one you feel in the marrow of your bones. A low, rhythmic vibration, like a giant heart beating deep beneath the house. Thump, thump, thump. I sat bolt upright in the old bed, my own heart hammering against my ribs. It was coming from below, from under the hearthstone. I woke Liam. "Do you hear that?" He listened, his face pale and the moonlight streaming through the window. "Hear what, mate?" "Just the wind. This place is getting to you. Go back to sleep." But I couldn't. I lay there, frozen, listening to the impossible pulse echoing from the foundations of my inheritance. It wasn't wind. It was something buried. And it was awake. I hears a rhythmic pounding from beneath the ancient hearthstone, but Liam cannot hear it, leaving Oliver to question his sanity and fear what lies beneath. The next morning, the pounding was gone. The house was just a cold, silent, old building. I convinced myself it was the plumbing, a trick of the wind in the chimney. Liam, ever the pragmatist, was already measuring windows, talking about development potential. I needed a distraction, so I called my girlfriend, Chloe. She's a history student, practical and fiercely intelligent. She heard the strain in my voice and caught the next train up from London. Her presence was a comfort. While Liam started clearing out the overgrown garden, Chloe poked around the house. She found Uncle Arthur's study, its shelves lined with journals on local geology and folklore. "This place is fascinating, Ollie. It's like a time capsule." That afternoon, she went down to the village to get supplies. She returned hours later, her face thoughtful, clutching a photocopy from a book in the tiny local library. "Listen to this," she said, spreading the paper on the dusty kitchen table. "It's a local legend. They call it the Stone Sleeper. A entity, not a god or a demon, but something older. A presence of the land itself, said to sleep deep beneath the hills. The legend says it dreams, and its dreams influence the land, good harvests, mild winters. And the bad dreams? Liam asked, a smirk playing on his lips. Chloe's expression was grave. If it wakes, even partially, its waking thoughts are pure malice. Blight, madness, disappearances. The old families, the ones who've been here for centuries, were supposedly tasked with keeping it asleep. There's mention of a ritual. A binding. A knot. A knot? I asked, the word triggering a memory of the spiral in the hearth. It's vague, she admitted. It just says the knot must be maintained, the invitation must stand, lest the sleeper stirs. That night I dreamt. I was in the sitting room, but it was warmer, lit by firelight. An old man, Uncle Arthur, was on his knees by the hearth, his hands pressed against the spiral, muttering under his breath. He looked terrified. Then he turned to me, his eyes wide with panic. He's pulling at the strings. He mustn't find the ends. He mustn't. His voice dissolved into a guttural, choking sound, as if an invisible rope were tightening around his neck. I woke up gasping, my throat raw. The room was freezing. My body ached. Flicking on the bedside lamp, I looked down at my arms. Thin, red welts, like marks from coarse rope, were etched into my skin around my wrists and ankles. My pajama shirt was damp with cold sweat. I stumbled into the bathroom, my heart pounding, and pulled up my shirt to look in the mirror. Across my lower back, a livid bruise-like pattern had appeared overnight. It wasn't random. It was a complex, twisting design, a series of loops and crosses. It was a knot. Chloe, hearing me move, came to the door. "Ollie? Are you okay?" Her question died in her throat. Her eyes widened in horror as she saw the mark on my back. "My God, Oliver, what is that?" I could only stare at her reflection in the mirror, my face pale with a terror I didn't yet understand. The inheritance wasn't just the house. It was the ritual. It was the knot. And something was trying to untie it. I wakes to find physical marks on his body, including a complex knot-shaped bruise on his back, proving the entity's influence is terrifyingly real and personal. The days blurred into a cold, fear-soaked haze. The mark on my back didn't fade. It deepened, a purple and black brand against my skin. A constant, icy chill clung to me, no matter how many jumpers I wore or how high I stoked the fire. I stopped sleeping, terrified of the dreams, of what I might wake up with. The silence of the house was now a lie. It was a hell breath. I started hearing things, a faint, dry scraping, like stone on stone, from the chimney breast. A whisper on the edge of hearing that sounded like my name, but dragged over gravel. Liam's skepticism had evaporated, replaced by a nervous energy. He bought extra lamps, flooding the house with harsh electric light, as if to keep the shadows at bay. It didn't work. The darkness felt thicker in the corners, resistant to the light. Chloe became our archivist. She spent every daylight hour buried in Arthur's journals, her face growing increasingly pale. "It's all here, Ollie," she said one evening, her voice trembling as she held up a cracked leather-bound book. "He writes about it like it's a duty, a chore. Like maintaining a fence. The ritual. He called it tending the knot," she explained, her words tumbling out. "It's not an exorcism. It's a maintenance cycle. A loop. The last living heir has to perform it every night without fail. It's not about strength, it's about consistency. He writes that the sleeper is always testing the bonds, pulling at the threads, dreaming them loose. The ritual tightens them again." "He was old," I whispered, the pieces clicking into a horrifying picture. "He got sick. He couldn't do it anymore." Chloe nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. The pulling got stronger. He started writing about strings cutting into his own skin, about hearing a heart beating under the floor. He knew he was failing. He knew he had to pass the duty on. That's why he left the house to you. You're the last heir. The weight of it crushed me. This wasn't an inheritance. It was a sentence. That night, exhaustion finally overcame fear. I fell into a deep, unnatural sleep. I didn't dream. I was standing in the sitting room in my pajamas, but the room was wrong. The walls were streaked with damp, and the air hummed with a low, malevolent energy. In my hands was a length of rough, hempen rope, cold and pulsing with a life of its own. One end was tied to the iron ring in the hearthstone. The other end vanished into a dark, swirling vortex in the floorboards. The rope was frayed, straining. From the vortex, I could feel an immense, patient pull. A desire to be free. A voice, desperate and thin, echoed from the corner. "No! Oliver, don't!" I turned. A faint, shimmering outline of an old man, Uncle Arthur, stood there, his hands raised in warning. "You mustn't touch it! You must weave it back! Don't let him pull you!" But it was too late. The pull from the vortex was hypnotic, compelling. It wanted me to untie it. It promised me peace, an end to the cold, if I just let go. My hands, moving of their own volition, reached for the frayed end. "No!" Arthur's ghost cried out, lunging at me. We struggled over the rope, a bizarre tug-of-war between the living and the dead. He was insubstantial, a chill mist, but his will was strong. The entity's pull was a physical force, a dark gravity. In the struggle, my hand scraped against a sharp, protruding stone in the hearth. Pain, sharp and real, lanced through my arm. I cried out, yanking my hand back. Clutched in my fist was a shard of flint, sharp as a blade. The entity's will surged through the rope, flooding my mind with a single, furious command: cut it. With a scream that was both mine and not mine, I sawed the sharp stone across the taut, straining rope. The snap wasn't loud. It was a deep, final thrum that vibrated through the entire house, silencing everything. The rope end whipped away into the darkness. Uncle Arthur's ghost let out a sound of utter despair and vanished. The pulling stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. And then, from the depths below the house, came a sound that defied nature, a low, satisfied, grinding sigh that shook the very stones of Hawksridge Farm. The knot was undone. In a sleepwalking trance, I, influenced by the entity, severs the ritual knot with a sharp stone, unleashing a terrifying, satisfied sigh from deep beneath the house. The sigh faded, leaving a silence so profound it felt like the world had ended. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the house let out a groan, a deep structural complaint, as if a pressure it had held for centuries had suddenly been released. The temperature plummeted. Our breath plumed in the air in the lamplight. The electric lights flickered, buzzed, and died, plunging us into a darkness that was thick and hungry. "Ollie? Liam?" Chloe's voice was a small, terrified whisper in the blackness. A scraping sound started from the walls, not just from the hearth now, but from everywhere. It was the sound of stone grinding against stone, of something huge moving through the foundations. Liam fumbled for his phone, activating the torch. The beam cut a shaky path through the darkness, illuminating the sitting room. The walls were weeping. A thick, black, tar-like substance was oozing from between the stones, dripping onto the floor with a soft, wet plop. It smelled of turned earth and rot. The back door, which Liam had deadbolted, suddenly flew open with a splintering crack, letting in a coil of thick gray mist. It didn't behave like normal fog. It slithered along the floor, clinging to the corners, moving with a vile, sentient purpose. "Something's out there!" Liam yelled, scrambling to shut the door. He peered out the window, his phone torch shining into the murk. His face, illuminated in the beam, went slack with pure, unadulterated terror. "Oh God!" He stumbled back from the window, dropping his phone. The light spun, casting crazy shadows. "I saw it! Moving in the fog! A thing! Long and thin, like it was made of stone, but it moved so fast!" Panic seized us completely. We were rats in a trap. Chloe, trembling, grabbed Arthur's journal from the table, frantically flipping through the pages by the light of her own phone. "He wrote about this. He wrote about if it ever got loose," she cried, her voice cracking. "The invitation. It's the only way. He says the knot is broken, the binding is gone. It can't be remade. The only way to contain it now is to invite it in." "Invite what in?" Liam shouted, his back against the door, as something heavy thudded against it from outside. "The sleeper!" Chloe's eyes were wide with horror as she read. "The last heir has to invite it into themselves. A new vessel. To draw it away from the land and trap it in a mortal body. A body that can die and take it back into the earth." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "It's a suicide pact, Ollie. You have to let it in, and then you have to die." The grotesque impossibility of it froze me solid. Before I could even process it, a new sound cut through the chaos. Crack. It was the sound of splitting granite. On the interior wall of the sitting room, the one that backed onto the hillside, a fissure ripped open from floor to ceiling. Dust and stone fragments pattered onto the floor. From the impenetrable blackness within the crack, the black, viscous liquid began to pour out in a river. It pooled on the floor, defying physics, and began to rise. It took shape, a tall, vaguely humanoid form of shifting shadow and dripping malice. It had no face, only a swirling, empty vortex where its head should be. It took a step forward. Then another. It didn't walk, it flowed, gliding over the floor towards us. It was ignoring Liam. It was ignoring Chloe. It was coming for me. The invitation had begun. And it was the guest of honor. The entity is fully unleashed, physically manifesting in the house as a terrifying shadow figure. Chloe discovers the only way to stop it is for Oliver to invite it into his own body and then sacrifice himself, as the creature advances directly towards him. It was coming for me. A tidal wave of freezing shadow, and its target was my soul. Liam grabbed an iron poker from the hearth, yelling, swinging it wildly through the form. It passed through without resistance, the mist coalescing back together instantly, unconcerned. Chloe threw a heavy book. It disappeared into the blackness without a sound. They were insects. We all were. The journal's words echoed in my mind. The last heir has to invite it in. This was my fault. My weakness had broken the knot. This ancient, hungry thing was loose because of me. I thought of that thing out in the fog, of the black slime on the walls, of it spreading beyond this valley, to Hawksmere, to the world, guided by my selfish fear. I thought of Chloe and Liam, their lives extinguished because of my inheritance. A strange calm descended upon me. There was no choice. There was only duty. Arthur's duty. Now mine. "Stop!" I commanded, my voice stronger than I felt. The thing paused, its head like vortex tilting, as if curious. I took a step forward, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "You want a home?" I said, my voice shaking but clear. "You want out? Then come and get it." I opened my arms. An invitation. The entity didn't hesitate. It surged forward, a black tsunami of absolute cold. It didn't hit me, it poured into me. Through my mouth, my nose, my eyes, every pore. It was drowning me from the inside out. I felt my mind being pushed into a tiny, dark corner of my own skull. I was a passenger. I felt an intellect vast, ancient, and utterly alien settle into my bones, my nerves, my flesh. My body was no longer mine. It was a suit. A prison. I felt a smile stretch my lips, a gesture that was not my own. My head turned, and I looked at Chloe and Liam with new, cold eyes. I saw them not as people, but as warmth, as life, as food. My hand, moving with a will that was not mine, reached for the same sharp flint I had used to cut the rope. Yes, a voice that was mine and not mine whispered in my head. A new beginning. Starting with them. I fought. With every shred of my soul, I fought for control of my own hand. The internal struggle was silent, horrific. My body trembled, the flint shaking in my grip. And then, for a fleeting second, I saw him. Uncle Arthur. Faint, transparent, standing right behind Liam. His face was etched with grief and pride. He didn't speak, but he nodded. He pointed at my hand, at the stone, and then gently at my own chest. Now, his silent message screamed. Now, Oliver! With a final, agonizing burst of will, I wrenched control. I screamed, a raw, human sound in the face of the invading silence. I turned the flint away from my friends and drove it, with all the strength I had left, deep into my own chest. The pain was astronomical, white-hot and absolute. But the sound that came out of my mouth was not a scream of pain. It was a roar of pure, undiluted fury, a sound of grinding stone and shattering mountains. The windows of the farmhouse blew outwards. The black slime on the walls recoiled and evaporated. The ancient entity within me raged against its new, mortally wounded cage. It was trapped. I was dying, and I was taking it with me. My legs gave way. I collapsed to the cold stone floor. The last thing I saw was Chloe and Liam's terrified, heartbroken faces swimming above me. The last thing I felt was the cold stone of the floor against my cheek. And then, nothing. I felt warmth on my face. I opened my eyes. I was outside. The sun was rising over the dales, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold. The evil mist was gone. The air was clean and still. I was lying in the dewy grass, my head in Chloe's lap. Liam was kneeling beside me, his face streaked with dirt and tears. Ollie? Oh God, Ollie, you're alive! Chloe sobbed, stroking my hair. I tried to speak, but only a faint rasp came out. My chest was on fire. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean. But I was me. I was. Liam let out a shaky laugh. You did it, mate. You crazy bastard, you actually did it. He helped me sit up. The farmhouse stood silent behind us. It just looked old now, not evil. Just a house. We had won. We had survived. Chloe cupped my face, her eyes searching mine, overflowing with relief and love. It's over, Oliver. It's finally. Her words died. Her smile vanished. Her eyes widened, locked on mine. The relief in them curdled into dawning, absolute horror. She scrambled back from me, a choked gasp escaping her lips. What? What is it? Liam asked, confused. I looked down at my hands. They looked normal. I felt normal. Tired, in pain, but me? Chloe? I said, my voice rough but my own. What's wrong? She just stared, her hand over her mouth, pointing a trembling finger at my face. At my eyes. Liam turned to look. His face went pale. The color drained from his world too. Confused, I raised a shaking hand to my face. My fingers touched the skin beneath my eye. It felt rough, gritty, like sandpaper. I needed to see. Using the black screen of Liam's dead phone as a mirror, I looked at my reflection. My face was mine, but my eyes. The whites were gone, replaced by a deep, smoky gray, like granite. And where my irises should have been, there were swirling, minute patterns of black and white stone, like the cross-section of ancient rock. They were pitiless, ancient, watching. I had invited it in. My body had been the trap. But a trap doesn't always kill its catch. Sometimes it just holds it. I had not died. I had become the vessel, the new prison. The stone sleeper was gone from the land. But it was not gone. It was right here, looking out through my eyes. I opened my mouth to reassure them, to say it was still me. The voice that came out was mine, but it was underlaid by a deep, grinding resonance, like two stones being rubbed together. It is not over, the thing inside me, and now part of me said. It is contained. I looked at my terrified friends, and I knew. The nightmare wasn't over. It had just found a new way to live. I survives the ritual, but the entity is not destroyed. It is now trapped within him, revealed by his eyes, which have turned into swirling, stone-like orbs, implying a permanent and terrifying fusion of man and monster.